What's going on, creatives? So I spent the last month developing 4 different full stack apps with the idea that I'm going to learn a lot of lessons on how to do this. And I did. Now, when I started the process, I had 3 questions I really wanted to answer. 1, can you build a full stack app with simple prompts? The answer is no, unless it's a very simple app. Question number 2 I wanted to answer. AI can fully automate and develop the process. AI can fully automate the development process. The answer is no for me, and I'll explain why. The third question I wanted to know was, you don't need to know how to code. Is that true? And I think the answer is yes, as long as you have a good process. And that's what I'm going to give you today. So what did I do? In building this app, I use 7 different tools to do these 6 things. And those tools are Claude and OpenAI, or ChatGPT. And that was all in the early stages. Getting everything together is what I use Claude and AI to do. For the front end, I use Bolt. Now, Lovable in Bolt and Windsurf and Cursor, of the 4, I thought Bolt performed the best of those 4 tools. Once I pulled everything off of Bolt, I used VS Code to do the coding along with ChatGPT and Claude. For the back end, I use Superbase, a really easy database to use. And then finally, for distribution, GitHub is hosting all of the files, and Vercel is kind of like pushing all of those files out into the public. So that's kind of how that is structured like that. So not a lot of tools, but these are the steps I use to get these apps live and out there in the world. The first step, number 1, the PRD, the product requirement document. This essentially is your Bible. If we were writing a novel, Game of Thrones or something like that, we need to do some world building. This is your world building document. This is your Wikipedia. This is everything you need to know on how this app is going to work. This is what the PRD looks like. Now, I think everyone's PRD, the structure, you do it the way you want to, but mainly you want to ask some questions. You know, your categories. What does the dashboard look like? What does the front end look like? How you're structuring the back end? What does the database look like? How does it navigate? What are the color schemes? Do you need components? All of these things that you need in order to make this thing work, you need to work this out in the beginning. And this then will help you structure the prompts when it's time to go to Bolt. The PRD is not your prompts. The PRD is your world building. And now I have to go write a chapter. And I think if you think of it like that, that's what happens. We do world building, we write chapters. The second part is designing the database. If you're going to have a backend, you need to design your database, and you need to think about this quite a bit before you actually go into Superbase and build the database. What are the different tables that you need? What are the fields in each table that you need? And are there any relationships between those fields? So let's say, for example, if we're talking about a normal customer database, I may have a customer, and in that table for my customer, I have his name, address, email address, and then a customer ID. But then when I look at his purchases, I have what he purchased it, when he purchased it, and then the customer ID. So I'm associating these purchases with my customers through the customer ID. That is when we talk about a primary key and a foreign key. The primary key, I got one customer. He gets that ID. In the purchases, he has multiple purchases, but his customer ID is associated with all of those purchases. We call that the foreign key. So you need to know these relationships going in, and you need to do that. So before you build that database, design that database, think about the relationships because you need to have that up front. Next, generating mock data. We haven't built the database. We haven't even touched the back end, but we're going to build out this front end. And what we want is essentially prototype. This is just prototype information. What we're thinking about here is that we're going to be building out this front end. We want to see how this actually looks. So we need some dummy data. And this is what your mock data looks like. And so you're just going in and you're telling ChatGPT to take your database, how you've designed it, and create some mock data. This is what we can give to Bolt for the front end development, and saying, use this mock data to populate everything. All that's left to do, build the front end. This is when it gets fun. Okay. So we spent a lot of time with the PRD. We spent our time getting the database right. We spent time getting our mock-up data. Now we can build the front end. And the PRD, we built out our world. And now for Bolt, we're going to write the chapters. And as you can see, this is the prompt I gave Bolt, the very first prompt. And you can see I have the purpose. I have an image. So if we look here, you can see this is the inspiration for the color scheme that I wanted. So it had that, the purpose, the scope, the main view showcase, the ability, what can the users do, the features, filters. I mean, I basically gave it everything. And I also told it right here, future integration with Superbase, user authentication, data storage, but I said phase 1 is on UI development only. So if you think about this, is that we're telling Bolt everything we want in this first chapter. We've set up the story for Bolt to really know this. Like, I know I'm going to be going to Superbase. Everything is structured, and we start working. And we just keep going through this process. If you were to see this history, there are only 8 prompts to get me here, but they are detailed prompts. If you look at the second prompt, you can see these are detailed prompts that I'm giving it, very long prompts. And I'm structuring in a way that I'm built the first page, build out the log, build out the report, build the settings, did a couple of feedbacks. So methodically went through this front end and built it. I changed my mind about authentication, but had I kept the authentication, I would have had Bolt build out the authentication here. Now, once I'm done with this, I just went to export and downloaded the code, because for the back end, I want to work in VS Code. And that's what we'll talk about next. So the next is the back end. And the back end is, let's think how we want to build out the back end. We've already designed the database. We've given Bolt the mock-up data, knowing, and Bolt knows that it needs to set up its structure for Superbase. So we've done those 2 things. So our front end is ready to go to accept our back end. We now have to design the back end. And the reason why I say do this in your IDE or VS Code or Cursor, whatever, is because when we've gone through and designed the database, we can then just ask ChatGPT to set the permissions. This is just the instructions to build out the tables. And if we go into Superbase, what you do is you log in, you create it, you go to the SQL editor, and you paste that code into here and click run. And it sets up the tables. And now it becomes easy. When I go over to the table editor, I now have my tables. Replacing the mock data. Now, this really comes down to a couple of things. If you got this process right, if you set up everything properly, this should go fairly fast. If you didn't, this is where you're going to spend a lot of time with your code. The way we structure this, it is looking at this file to understand the database. So it's using this. It has the Superbase client and it's importing this information to populate our dashboard. So if we come over here to type TS, you can see this is the database. Looks similar to the mockup data, right? Because all we did was we're exporting this to the interface. And then when we go to the dashboard, it's saying, okay, look into this file and pulling all of that information from that to populate the database. I won't get too deep into the code, but basically in the sense that what you're exchanging out when I say replace the mock data is simply changing this and a few other commands inside of this file. Makes it real easy if you set this up properly. Next step is enable CRUD. And it's a weird terminology, but basically it's saying create, replace, update, and delete. Essentially, does your database work? If I add a new file in, does it get created? So if I pull up the live version of my database, if I go to a new project, I want to know, let's go to education. We'll put it at to do. We'll get started on the 27th, finish on the 7th, and we will save the project. And now all I want to know is that when I did that, did it update my database? I can come here and see, did it update my database? And you can see that we have it here, QS, test, to do, and we have it updated. Okay, so it works, right? Final step is to do all of that test and integration, get everything up and running. We want to get it over to GitHub. We want to get it into Vercel. And I actually have, if you've never done this before, I actually have steps on how to do that. It's actually quite easy. You'll be surprised how easy it is to get something like this out into the world. It's surprisingly easy. But once you've done all of that, you're ready to go. I want to leave you guys with this. We can build apps. If you do not know how to code, you can build apps. But it's not as easy as everyone makes it seem, especially as the app gets slightly complicated. For really easy one-page apps, you can do that. And that's where I would encourage you to start. Don't start with an app like this. I built 6 or 7 really small 1-page, 2-page apps before I even started getting to full stack. So, how do you start this process? Start small. Get some really small, simple apps, only the front end, and just get mock data for the back end to pretend to be the back end. Simple as that. And then work your way up to doing